Hi, good morning. The book we will be studying today would be the book of Joshua. It follows after the book of Deuteronomy. It is also called as the beginning of the historical books. Okay, so the um, if you have the Genesis or the Pentateuch, next one would be the historical books, starting off with Joshua and then followed by Judges and then Ruth and then Samuel, Kings. So these are the books that we will be having to consider and to focus on in the next couple of days. So our learning objectives, the learning objectives that we have for this book is that we will look into the theme of Joshua, and we'll also try to see the key text in understanding the book of Joshua. Always, although this is just a simplification, or it seems that we're just so much simplifying the entire book by looking into the key text, but then these key texts that we would be looking at would be of big help as long as you have the text that would be giving you a grasp of what the book is all about, and it's going to guide you in a deeper appreciation of the entire book. So in this lesson for today, the learning objectives again is the theme of Joshua. We need to know what the theme of Joshua is, and the key text of the book of Joshua. So these are our learning objectives. Hopefully, at the end of this course, at the end of this day, you'll have to know what the theme of Joshua is and the text that supports the theme, or that proves or that shows that this is indeed the theme of the book of Joshua. In our discussion, we will be looking into we will try to give you the overview. I'll give you the structure of the book of Joshua, and then the message, and then the key text of the book. Okay, so first, as an overview, we'll go into what is the setting of the book of Deuteronomy. Well, the book of Deuteronomy ends with Israel in the plains of Moab, just east of Jericho, and Israel is poised to enter the promised land. And the book of Joshua picks up right there where the book of Deuteronomy ends. Remember, I showed you about the plains of Moab and where Moses was. Okay, Moses must have felt so heavy, probably because he was too old. It doesn't matter anymore. But then he was really hoping to step into the promised land. Now, the mission that he had, starting off when he was 40 years old, was really to bring back the Israelites to the promised land. And his sin, we also discussed it last meeting. We talked about the difference between the presentation of Moses' sin in Exodus 17 and that of Numbers 20. So that was the reason why God did not allow Moses to enter into the promised land, because in Numbers 20, instead of him commanding the rock, he actually struck it. So it's more about obedience, and more so because he started to claim. He said about the word, he's using the first person plural we, instead of letting or making God be the center, or the one who really caused the water to gush forth from the rock. So again, the book of Deuteronomy, or the book of Joshua, picks up right there where the book of Deuteronomy ends, with Israel really about to enter into the promised land. So the setting of Joshua really started off, if you're going to look into the text, the first part of Joshua, the first chapter of Joshua would be that of God commissioning Joshua to be in rank, next in rank of Moses. After Moses died, the servant of the Lord spoke to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' assistant, saying, "My servant Moses is dead. Now proceed to cross the Jordan, you and all these people, into the land that I'm giving to them, to the Israelites." So this is now the beginning of the book of Joshua, the Israelites about to enter into the promised land. Now, what separates them is the river Jordan. Okay, now they have to cross after they're going to cross the Jordan from the Moabite side. then they are already in the land of promise. So if you're going to go back to the book of Genesis, God promised not only that He would have a people who were as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore, but that these people would inherit the land of Canaan as their possession, as their promised land. And now Israel is finally about to inherit that promise. So way back in Genesis, when Abraham was called by God to become a father of a great nation, and He also promised him to own or to live in the land of Canaan, there was a sojourn of this promise, because we all know in the book of Genesis that there was famine in the land. And so Joseph, being the second in command in the entire Egypt, allowed his brothers, the 12, his other 11 brothers, including his father, 12th one, to stay in Egypt until they really settled in Egypt. And then the book of Exodus will tell us about their sad fate in the hand of the Egyptians, and the role of Moses for to liberate them from the slavery of Egypt. Okay, so there are three major sections in the book of Joshua. The first one is in chapters 1 to 12, also known as Conquering the Land. And then chapters 13 to 22 is Distributing the Land, and the chapters 23 to 24 is Living in the Land. Okay, so in looking into the structure of the book of Joshua, the conquering the land really started off with them. The first part is really preparing for a conqueror. So it's a good story for us to hopefully to dwell on if we just had time. Is that when Joshua sent spies to Jericho, and the character that we have to always remember here is that of Rahab. Okay, Rahab, who became one of the grandmothers, great grandmothers of Jesus. In the Gospel of Matthew, in chapter 1, verse 5, the name of Rahab would be mentioned. Okay, so it continues from Abraham down to, so in verse 5, and Salmon, the father of Boaz by Rahab, and Boaz, the father of Obed by Ruth. Okay, so when Ruth gave birth, uh, he gave birth to Obed, and Boaz, remember Boaz, who was the one who helped Ruth and Naomi when they came back from Moab. So Rahab was the prostitute who actually she gave a safe passage for the spies. So there's a good reading in chapter 2 of Joshua. That it's good for you to check on how the spy or how the prostitute in fact helped the spies in order for them to conquer Jericho. And the theme of the book of Joshua focuses on inheriting the promise. Inheriting the promise. So the message of the book of Joshua is that God is faithful to the promise. The message of the book of Joshua is about how God is faithful to His promise, so that Israel can inherit the land. And a good thing to point out at this point is that to showcase or to highlight that God has always been very faithful to the Israelite. His promise to Israel the message of the book is really about how God is faithful to His promise, so that Israel can inherit the promised land. And a key verse is in chapter 23, verse 24. It says, "Now says Joshua, I am about to go the way of all the Lord. You know with all your heart and soul that not one of all the good promises that Lord your God gave you has failed. Every promise has been fulfilled, not one has failed." So the message of the book of Joshua is about the faithfulness of God. Okay, and the book of Joshua also is about His promise to bring Israel to inherit the promised land, in particular from a human point of view. Okay, so it's about love and loyalty, in fact. Okay, so here Let's go back to Joshua 23:14. It says, "Now, says the Lord, says Joshua, I am about to go the way of all the Lord, the way of all the Lord." No, it should not be that way. Let's see. 23:14, 23:24. It says, 23:14. And now I'm about to go the way of all the earth, not of all the Lord. You know with all your heart and your soul that not one of all the good promises the Lord your God gave you has failed. Every promise has been fulfilled. So you know with all your heart and soul that not one of all the good things that the Lord your God has fallen. So if you notice the 3 times it says not one promise has failed. Okay, that threefold repetition here. Let's see. This threefold repetition first would be here. You know that not one. This is one. Not one of all the good promises the Lord your God has gave you has failed. The second one, every promise has been fulfilled. The third one, not one has failed. Okay, so these threefold repetition underscoring how God has been utterly faithful to the promise made to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. And finally, he has fulfilled that promise. You know how miserable probably the Israelites were. Okay, they must have been thinking and been asking, will there be a fulfillment of the promise after all? They stayed in Mount Sinai for almost 40 years. And probably the first generation, the ones who left Egypt, already dying. So the second generations are the ones to receive the promises. They must have been asking the question, is the promise going to be fulfilled? Is it going to push through? Or are we only going to be hoping for nothing at all? But then in the book of Joshua, it's very clear that indeed God fulfills His promise. And that would be on the divine side. And then in the human side, we have to also see that the book of Joshua, in the human side, the book of Joshua is about how God is faithful to His promise to bring Israel to inherit the promised land. But in particular, from a human point of view, they actually have participated on it also. So the text says, through love and loyalty. Okay, through love and loyalty. Let's see the one of Joshua 24:15. Joshua 24:15. This is how he will tell his fellow as Israelites of what love and loyalty is all about. In 24:25 it says, "Now if you are unwilling to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your ancestors served in the region beyond the river of the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." So you see, it's in chapter 24. Remember, the three main sections of the book, chapters 23 and 24 is now living in the land. And what Joshua is commanding his fellow Israelites is that in order for them, the reason why the promise has been fulfilled, of course, on the divine side, God has always been faithful to them. And in the human side, what is expected of them is that of love and loyalty. And so Joshua said, as for me, what did he say? As for me, I shall serve. Okay, now if you're willing, he said, but as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. So this is an expression of his love and loyalty to the Lord. So the entire story of Joshua is about inheriting the promise. Now, in our story moving forward, we already have the Israelites in the promised land. So they have already crossed. They crossed the Red Sea. They stayed in Mount Sinai. So in Deuteronomy, they were in the plains of Moab. They were looking at the promised land. They have to cross Jordan. They have to conquer first the city of Jericho. Now that they have conquered the city of Jericho, they have already settled in the promised land. So moving forward, we will be having the book of Judges. So I want you to read and or of course, to listen to this recording. Go into the text if you have time. Especially, I know we're running out of time, but if you have time, please. It's only 24 chapters of Joshua. Please try to read through it and chew on the message, okay, the theme of Joshua. Look into some of the many instances in which God, in little ways, really have fulfilled the promise. So now they are inheriting the promise. Thank you so much. Good day.